Yes, well, Sir Keir Starmer has committed to a full ban on conversion therapy if he wins the election, despite warnings that a ban could threaten the freedom of parents and medical professionals to talk to children about gender identity issues. Labour wants to outlaw conversion therapy. Now, this aims to suppress a person's sexuality or gender identity. As they say, it amounts to abuse. And, you know, I think people can understand that maybe some of it is a little bit weird. But Hilary Cass, the author of a landmark review of gender services for children, has warned. I think clinicians will be really worried that if they have conversations with a young person and then they change their gender identity, then they could accuse the person of conversion. Nobody wants to be the first test case. That's the real challenge. Cass also warned that the legal threat posed by a conversion therapy ban could drive professionals away from treating people with gender dysphoria. But despite this, Labour are determined to push the policy through quickly, ideally within their first 100 days in government. No idea why, but that's what they want to do. Women and Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch has now blasted Labour. She says that they're blundering into this space without due care and attention, placing gender ideology over sound policy making, adding that there was a risk the ban could criminalise parents, clinicians and teachers. Tonight I'm asking, are Labour right to pledge a broad ban on trans conversion therapy despite the numerous warnings? Let me know your thoughts. gbnews.com/your say. Tweet me at gbnews. Go and vote in our poll. But first, going head-to-head on this, our discrimination lawyer, Moira White, and social commentator, Ollie London. Both of you, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Ollie, I'll start with you. The fear here by some people is that this could basically criminalise somebody if they told a child that they might not be trans. Is that a worry for you?
Yeah, it's definitely very problematic. I mean, we can all agree when it comes to gay conversion therapy, that is incredibly wrong, and most people will agree with that. But this is where it gets tricky when it comes to transgender children, because, of course, we see clinicians, therapists, other people trying to help kids that may be struggling with gender dysphoria. We know it is a real thing, but the numbers of children that are struggling with gender identity is really skyrocketing, and this is not a naturally occurring phenomenon. So the issue is that parents, clinicians, therapists may be criminalized for simply trying to help their child find peace with themselves and finally to kind of learn to love themselves. So I think it's very concerning.
Robin, this just feels like a massive backward step. We had the Cass report, we had people coming out and saying this vindicated the likes of J.K. Rowling, etc. And now here we are. Labour, within the first 100 days, could be accused of coming for the nation's kids.
No, come on. As Ollie said, there doesn't seem to be any doubt that gay conversion therapy is close to torture. And if we accept that trans people exist, a practice that denies that we have to define matters properly, we have to write good law, and if you engage in, quotes, therapy or conversion practices which deny a particular outcome as a valid one, there's nothing that prevents a discussion. There's nothing wrong with a discussion and giving people time to think and challenging their views. None of that would be wrong, but what would be wrong would be denying that a particular outcome can be right. And if we write bad law, we deserve what we get. What we need to do is engage with the new administration and make sure that we write good law.
OK, Ollie, I worry that we are heading back towards just total affirmation. So a child comes in and, you know, decides that they are wearing, you know, non-traditional clothing for their particular gender, etc. You know exactly the kind of cases I'm talking about here. And then instead of being able to have a rational conversation, the quotes-unquote medical professional rushes to affirm the fact that that child is indeed trans and sets them off on a you know, kind of irreversible pathway.
Well, you know, I would argue that in itself is conversion therapy. You know, taking a healthy kid, a boy that might be effeminate, you know, maybe the boy is gay, he just doesn't understand that at the moment, or maybe the girl is a tomboy, maybe she's a lesbian, and then when a doctor or clinician tells them, you are trans, let's get you, you know, transitioning, that is the wrong approach, because there are many, many kids that, you know, need to find themselves on their own. They don't need teachers, they don't need, you know, doctors telling them that they're trans. They need to figure that out on their own. And, you know, as an adult, people can make that decision. But I would say that, you know, transitioning kids itself, whether it's teachers in schools or anyone else, is a form of conversion therapy itself.
Yeah, I think a lot of people might agree with that. Robin, I'm going to ask you, another kind of slightly bonkers thing about what Labour do. Initially, so far this election campaign, it was going to make it easier for adults to identify as a different gender, and people thought, well, that might potentially pose a bit of a risk to women's-only spaces. And then it became, oh, actually, we're a bit squiffy on whether or not gender ideology is going to be taught to kids in schools. And then now here we are today about whether or not it could essentially criminalise people if they decide to tell a child that they're not, in fact, trans. And this legislation, I believe, was put forward initially by Lloyd Russell Moyle, who has been biffed by the Labour Party. Well, why are they rushing this forward?
Well, frankly, this legislation was put forward by the Conservative Party in its 2019 manifesto. And it's another one of the failed promises of the last Conservative administration. Kemi Badenoch has been saying that we are rushing into doing this. Well, Kemi's been part of an administration for 5 years that did nothing, didn't have the discussions, didn't have the appropriate talks with the relevant professionals and the people involved, and could have worked that through and just ducked the issue completely and has left it for the new administration. Absolutely, there are risks. Absolutely, we need to write good law that takes into account the risks, that doesn't criminalise parents for having a discussion with their children, doesn't criminalise medical professionals for having an appropriate conversation. I transitioned 13 years ago. I had those conversations with a therapist beforehand to ensure that I was indeed trans and I wasn't something else and there wasn't something being hidden there. It's absolutely right to have those discussions because these are really serious decisions.
But I just wonder, Robin, how much more evidence do we need that something is a little bit skew-if here, OK? Because we had issues whereby medical professionals appeared to be rushing to push trans onto kids, or at least affirm that. We know that people are very, very squiffy about what's being taught in schools, etc. We know that there was not really proper medical testing that was being done before people were being put on things like puberty blockers and all of that. Why are we now revisiting this, Robin? Why can't we just let this go? Why is the Labour Party so obsessed with appeasing a fraction of really quite a militant wing of the LGBT community?
Well, so militant that it was a Conservative policy in 2019.
Yeah, all right, fine, but we are where we are now. I get that, Robin, but we are where we are now. So let's just address this now when it comes to Labour Party.
And across the liberal Western democracies, conversion therapy is being banned country by country. We fall behind in the way in which we look after our citizens if we don't go down this route. It's right to go down this route. It's right to go down it carefully and thoughtfully and write good law that protects people and doesn't criminalise people it shouldn't criminalise. But we should stop people torturing gay people and trans people. OK, Ollie, look, final word to you. When you look around now and you see that this might be about to come in, etc., do you fear for children in an increasingly confusing world, especially with social media, especially with everything that's going on? And I think sexuality and gender issues are perhaps more at the forefront of a child's upbringing than they have been previously. Some people will think that's a good thing, obviously. Other people will think that's quite risky. Are you fearful for kids growing up these days?
Absolutely. You know, it's one thing for an adult to make an informed decision that's best for them, that makes them happy, and that's how they feel. But it's another thing when a child is having this really pushed at them from all angles, whether that's social media on TikTok, whether that's Hollywood films and TV shows, whether that's, RuPaul's Drag Race. I think that is the concern, is when it's being pushed in kids' faces, it's almost become cool. And we see, kids at schools, especially girls, becoming non-binary or trans because it's trendy. Groups and groups of girls in the same classes become non-binary. And it's one thing to wake up one day and feel like that, but when kids are actually going down a medical route, whether they just hit 18 or 19, and when they regret this decision in later life, that is irreversible.